For 8 years, Zoya bathed, fed and cleaned up after her bedridden mother-in-law, enduring insults, sleepless nights, and the silent absence of appreciation. But on the day of the funeral, when the lawyer opened a sealed envelope left behind by the woman everyone thought hated her, the truth inside made the entire room gasp and Zoya fall to her knees. Zoya was a quiet, humble woman from a small village. She had a kind heart and didn't talk much, but she always did what was right. After getting married to Kweku, a teacher in the city, she moved into his family house. Life was not easy, but Zoya didn't complain. Not long after she moved in, Kweku's mother, Madame Afura, fell seriously ill. She couldn't walk or do anything by herself anymore. The family was shocked, but none of Kweku's siblings or relatives offered to help. Everyone found one excuse or another to stay away. Some lived far, others said they were too busy. In the end, the work fell on Zoya's shoulders. Even though she was new in the family and very young, Zoya stepped in and took full responsibility for caring for Madame Afura. She helped her bathe, cleaned her up, cooked her meals, and stayed awake at night whenever Madame Afura cried or struggled to breathe. Zoya did it all quietly, without seeking praise or attention. Nobody really noticed her or said thank you. People treated her like she was just there to serve, but Zoya never stopped. She worked hard every day, and even though Madame Afura was not kind to her, she never walked away. While others came and went, laughed, and lived their lives, Zoya stayed behind and did everything for her sick mother-in-law. She became like a nurse, a helper, and a daughter all in one, but no one truly saw her. She was just the quiet daughter-in-law that people ignored, but she kept going, with love in her heart and strength in her spirit. For 8 long years, Zoya lived the same hard routine every single day. She woke up as early as 4 a.m. before the sun even came up. While others in the house still slept, she was already changing Madame Afura's bedsheets, cleaning her body and preparing her food. Sometimes the old woman had messed herself in the night, and Zoya would quietly clean everything without complaint. She would boil hot water, massage Madame Afura's tired legs and arms, feed her spoon by spoon, and even help her sit up to breathe better. It was a job that needed both strength and patience, and Zoya had both, even though she was just one woman doing everything alone. While other women went out to enjoy festivals, weddings, and family gatherings, Zoya stayed home. Year after year, she missed her own family's celebrations. She didn't visit her mother or father. She didn't go to any naming ceremonies or see her old friends. Her world became that small room where Madame Afura lay. Zoya's life was full of sacrifice, but no one really saw it. Her phone barely rang. Her name was rarely mentioned. She had given up her youth, her energy, her joy, all for a woman who never once said, "Thank you." Instead, Madame Afura insulted her often. She called Zoya ordinary and just a village girl. She blamed Zoya for everything that went wrong. If her son, Kweku, was facing problems at work, Madame Afura would say it was because he married a nobody. Zoya heard these words and swallowed her tears. Every day she faced cold eyes and sharp words, yet she stayed. Kweku, her husband, never defended her. He didn't insult her, but he didn't support her either. He always said things like, "Mama is old, let's just manage," or "Please don't start problems." He wanted peace in the house, so he stayed silent. His silence hurt just as much as the insults. Zoya felt alone, but she kept working, kept serving, and kept hoping that maybe one day someone would see all she had done. But for now, she was just the quiet shadow in the house, working, sacrificing, and being forgotten. And Zoya lived quietly in that house, giving her whole life to caring for Madame Afura, but the rest of the family, they only showed up when there was food, celebration, or something to take pictures for. On holidays like Easter, Christmas, and big family birthdays, they would arrive in fancy clothes, expensive cars, and with loud voices. They would come in laughing, hugging Madame Afura, calling her strong and blessed, acting as if they had been by her side all year. They didn't ask who cleaned up after her, who washed her clothes, or who stayed awake all night when she was in pain. They didn't ask because they didn't care. They saw Zoya there but treated her like a maid, not like family. Zoya would cook for them, clean after them, serve food with a smile, and still go back to check on Madame Afura who usually pretended she had done everything by herself. The family would nod and clap, saying things like, "Mama, you are so strong. You don't even look sick." And Zoya would just smile quietly, holding back the tears. Not even one of them looked at her with kindness. Not one said, "Thank you for all you're doing." Instead, they whispered cruel things. Some said Zoya was lucky Kweku even married her. A village girl like that, she should be grateful, they would say behind her back, but loud enough for her to hear. One cousin, Loma, was the worst. She came from the city, wore designer clothes, and always looked Zoya up and down like she was nothing. One day, she even said to Kweku, "You're still young, you can do better. Maybe find someone with more class, more education. This girl is holding you back." Zoya heard those words and felt like her heart broke in pieces, but she didn't cry. She had cried enough in that house. Instead, she went back to the kitchen, wiped her eyes with her wrapper, and kept cooking for the same people who insulted her. Nobody defended her, not even Kweku. He just looked down and said nothing. The same man she left her village for, the same man she supported, prayed for, and served without question. Sometimes Zoya wondered, if I left this house today, who would miss me? But she stayed, not because of love from the family, because that love never existed. She stayed because she believed in doing the right thing, even when no one clapped for her, even when they all acted like she was invisible. She stayed because she had made a promise to care for Madame Efura, and even if the world never noticed her, she knew in her heart that she was doing something pure, something real. The rain was pouring hard that night. The wind was loud, and thunder shook the roof. Everyone else in the house was asleep, but Zoya was still awake, sitting by Madame Efura's bed, like she always did. She had just cleaned her up again after a little accident, changed the sheets, and helped her drink some water. Madame Efura looked weak that night, more than usual. Her eyes looked tired, her breath slower. Zoya felt something was different, but she didn't know what. Suddenly, Madame Efura moved her hand slowly and reached out to touch Zoya's fingers. It was the first time she had ever done that. Her hand was cold, but the grip was soft. Then, in a shaky, quiet voice, she said, "Zoya." Just that. Zoya froze. In 8 years, Madame Efura had never called her by name. She always said, "you," or "girl," or sometimes even worse. Hearing her name from those lips felt strange, almost unreal. Zoya looked at her, eyes wide. Madame Efura kept holding her hand and whispered, "I see now. I was wrong." Those words hit Zoya like a wave. She couldn't believe what she just heard. Was this a dream? Or maybe Madame Efura had a fever and was saying anything. But when she looked into her eyes, she saw something real. Regret, softness, maybe even love. Zoya didn't know what to say. She just sat there, holding the old woman's hand, her heart heavy and confused. So many emotions inside her: surprise, pain, sadness. For years she had waited for just one word of kindness. Now, when she least expected it, it came. In the quiet of the night, during a storm, from the lips of a woman who had never shown her affection. She stayed beside her the whole night, holding her hand gently. She didn't sleep, afraid something might happen. And when morning came, as the rain stopped and the sun tried to rise, Zoya felt the hand she was holding go still, completely still. Madame Efura had passed, just like that, peacefully, quietly, in Zoya's care. Tears fell from Zoya's eyes, not just because Madame Efura was gone, but because it took 8 long years to hear the words she had waited for. And now, the person who finally saw her worth was no longer breathing. When Madame Efura passed away, the news spread quickly. By the next day, her house was filled with relatives from every corner. People who hadn't visited her in years suddenly showed up with long, sad faces, crying loudly and hugging each other as if they had lost someone very dear. They wore expensive clothes, carried big bags of food and drinks, and started giving orders like they owned the house. Zoya watched quietly from a corner. No one asked how she was feeling. No one remembered that she had been the one caring for Madame Efura every single day for 8 long years. Instead, she was treated like a stranger. One aunt even told her to move out of the front room because it was for real family. Another cousin shoved her aside, saying she was only the daughter-in-law, not a blood relative. It was like all her sacrifices meant nothing. When it was time for the funeral rites, Chief Bada, Madame Efura's proud cousin, took the lead. He walked around the compound with his chest out, acting like he had always been close to her. He gave speeches, shared stories, and praised Madame Fura for her strong spirit and loving family. Not once did he mention Zoya. Not once did anyone thank her for what she had done. They cried the loudest, danced the most, and acted like they had been there all along. But Zoya knew the truth. None of them had changed a single bedsheet, cooked a single meal, or stayed up all night massaging swollen feet. They had only come to put on a show, to be seen, and to say they were part of something. Zoya stood in the background, her eyes filled with quiet tears. She didn't need their fake love. She knew who she was. And even if no one clapped for her, she had done what none of them ever could. She had loved, served, and cared. Not for praise, but because her heart was pure. Just 2 days after the burial, when the noise of the funeral was beginning to settle, a quiet and serious-looking man came to the house. He wore a neat black suit and carried a brown leather bag. His name was Barrister Atul. He introduced himself as Madame Fura's personal lawyer. Nobody had heard of him before, so many people were surprised. He asked that all family members be called to the living room immediately. Everyone gathered, though some did so unwillingly. Some looked annoyed, others curious. Chief Bada rolled his eyes and said, "What now?" A few cousins whispered to each other, wondering why a lawyer would show up now that the funeral was over. Kweku looked confused but kept quiet. Zoya stood in a corner, silent as usual, not expecting anything. The lawyer opened his bag and pulled out a white-sealed envelope. "These are Madame Fura's final instructions," he said calmly. "She asked that this be read only after her burial and only in front of the whole family." Now the room was quiet. Even the loudest aunties kept still. The envelope had Madame Fura's full name written on it, in shaky handwriting. Barrister Atul held it up for all to see before opening it gently. The sound of the paper tearing felt loud in the silence. Some people started shifting in their seats. A few were expecting to hear about land, houses, or money. Others thought it would just be a thank you message. Nobody imagined what was coming next. Zoya, standing in the corner, just bowed her head. She didn't think Madame Fura had left anything for her. After all those years of being ignored, she didn't expect to be remembered at all. But the room was holding its breath. Whatever was inside that letter, it was going to change something. You could feel it in the air. The lawyer opened the letter carefully and began to read it aloud. Everyone in the room leaned forward. Some had proud smiles on their faces, expecting their names to be mentioned. Others crossed their arms, acting like they didn't care. But the very first line shocked them all. "If you're hearing this," the lawyer read, "then I have passed. And now the truth must come out." The room went completely silent. All eyes were on him. "I want to speak about someone who truly showed me what love means," the letter continued. "Zoya." Everyone turned to look at her. Zoya froze, her heart pounding. The lawyer kept reading. "When Zoya came into this family, I didn't welcome her with open arms. In fact, I was jealous of her. She was kind, patient, and strong. Everything I wished I had been. I saw how she worked from morning till night, caring for me without complaint. Even when I called her names, ignored her, or blamed her for things, she never answered back with anger. She just kept caring." Zoya's eyes filled with tears. Kweku stared at his hands. Chief Bada shifted in his seat, suddenly very uncomfortable. She gave up her happiness, her freedom, and even visits to her own family, just to make sure I was okay. And yet, I never said thank you. But now I will. The lawyer paused, letting the words sink in. "Zoya," he continued, "you are the only one who never left my side. The only one who didn't need anything from me. The only one who truly loved me for who I was, even when I was difficult. You are my daughter, more than anyone else ever was." People gasped. One aunt nearly dropped her handbag. The same people who mocked Zoya now looked at her with wide eyes, speechless. But Zoya didn't move. She stood there, quiet, as always. But this time, her heart was full, not of pain, but of peace. Because finally, the truth had come out. And it had come straight from the one person who never said a kind word, until now. As the lawyer reached the final part of the letter, the whole room held their breath. No one made a sound. Even the ones who were whispering or rolling their eyes before were now paying close attention. The lawyer looked around the room, then read the closing words from Madame Fura. "My last wish," he said, his voice steady, "is one I thought deeply about. I have decided to give everything I own, the family house, the land in our village, And all the savings in my account. To Zoya, gasps filled the room. Someone dropped their cup of tea. A cousin coughed loudly, as if choking on surprise. Aunties and uncles started looking at each other with wide, confused eyes. The lawyer continued, "And my reason is simple, because no one else earned it." The room fell into complete silence. You could hear a pin drop. All the relatives who once praised Madame Afura on holidays, who wore the brightest clothes and cried the loudest at the funeral, suddenly had nothing to say. The same people who called Zoya just a village girl were now looking at her differently, not with pity, but with jealousy and shock. Zoya stood quietly in the corner. Her hands were folded. She was not smiling, not showing off. Her eyes were full of tears, but not because of the property or the money. It was because for the first time, someone saw her worth. For the first time, her silent service was not ignored. Some of the relatives tried to argue. One uncle said, "But she didn't tell us." Another cousin shouted, "This must be a mistake." But the lawyer calmly said, "Everything is legal. Everything is signed." Madame Ifura made her decision with a clear mind. No one could change anything now. Zoya didn't say a word. She walked out of the room quietly, just as she had entered, calm, gentle, and full of grace. But this time, she wasn't just the quiet daughter-in-law. She was the owner of everything, and the entire family knew, deep down, that she truly deserved it. As soon as the lawyer finished reading the will, the room exploded with noise. Kweku's aunt stood up angrily, shouting that it wasn't fair. His cousins whispered among themselves, eyes wide with shock. One of them pointed at the lawyer and said, "We must take this to court. This can't be real." They couldn't believe Madame Mifura had given everything to Zoya, the woman they had always looked down on. Within a few days, the family made their move. They gathered money, hired a lawyer, and filed a case in court to fight Madame Mifura's will. They claimed it was fake, that maybe Zoya had tricked the old woman, or that Madame Mifura had not been in her right mind when she signed it. They were ready to do anything to take the house, the land, and the money back. But when the court opened the case and looked at the papers, they found everything perfect. Every signature matched. Madame Mifura's fingerprints were there. Witnesses had also signed. The date and time were recorded clearly. Everything was done legally, and no mistake could be found. Even Kweku, Zoya's husband, was silent during the court hearing. He looked confused and lost. He admitted that he didn't know his mother had changed her will. He said softly, "She never told me. I didn't see this coming." His words surprised everyone. But Zoya, through it all, stayed calm. She didn't raise her voice or argue. She didn't insult anyone or remind them of how badly they treated her. She simply listened, nodded, and at the end of it all, she stood up, thanked the lawyer politely, and walked home. Her home now. No pride, no loud celebration, just quiet steps of a woman who had suffered in silence for 8 long years and finally got what she deserved. Her strength was not in fighting back with words, but in her quiet dignity. The house that once saw her as a servant was now truly hers, and everyone in the family finally saw her, not as a village girl, but as a woman of honor and quiet power. Months passed, and Zoya's life took a turn that no one expected. She took the house that once felt cold and empty and transformed it into something beautiful. With Madame Afura's name, she turned it into a small health center, a place where people came for care, advice, and healing. It was her way of honoring the woman she had once cared for so deeply. She didn't stop there. Zoya knew the importance of giving back to her community, just like she had once given so much of herself. So, she began training young women in basic caregiving and nursing. She taught them how to care for the sick, how to hold a person's hand in their final moments, and how to offer comfort in times of pain. These women, eager to learn and help, looked up to her as a mentor and a leader. Zoya's dedication to helping others made her respected by everyone who came through the door. No longer was she the quiet village girl who was pushed aside. She was a symbol of strength, kindness, and resilience. Over time, the people who used to ignore her began to admire her for all the good she had done. And Zoya, with a heart full of humility, continued to work, never forgetting the woman who had once been so harsh toward her. In the final scene, we see Zoya sitting at the same table where, years ago, she ate alone, feeling invisible. But this time, it's different. Now, the table is filled with people, women she's trained, young nurses she's mentored, and others who call her Madame Zoya. She's no longer just a caregiver. She's the matriarch of this new family she's built, a community that recognizes her worth. Zoya looks around, a quiet smile on her face, and for the first time, she feels truly seen. The same woman who once was unnoticed is now surrounded by respect, love, and gratitude. If Zoya's incredible transformation inspired you, imagine what you could achieve when you finally step into your true power. Don't let anyone define your worth. Take control of your own story, just like Zoya did. If you believe in the power of resilience, strength, and self-worth, hit that like button, share this story, and leave a comment below with how you're going to step into your greatness today. Let's spread the message that no matter where we start, we can always rise higher. Don't forget to subscribe for more empowering stories like this one. And remember, your journey starts now.